Look, if you are over the age of 60, continuing to eat the exact same way you did in your 30s isn't just, inefficient. It is a fast track to severe biological decline.
Absolutely. The medical reality we're discussing today is, well, it's stark and it's incredibly urgent.
Right. Because at this stage of life, your body's metabolic and filtration systems have fundamentally and permanently changed. The dietary protocols that may have sustained you decades ago are now actively accelerating cellular aging.
They are. I mean, they are driving systemic inflammation and quietly compromising your vital organs.
And we are looking at a landscape where the absolute rules of human biology dictate an immediate recalibration of what you consume.
That is the biological imperative we're facing. And we need to treat it with the gravity it deserves. The human body at 60 or 70 is simply not the human body at 30.
The physiological margins of error have narrowed.
Exactly. They've narrowed significantly. Your endogenous antioxidant production, which is the internal system that fights off cellular damage, has naturally dropped.
And your gastric acid secretion has altered too, right? Changing how you actually break down proteins.
Yes, precisely. Plus, your kidney filtration rates have naturally slowed, and your gastrointestinal absorption of critical micronutrients is compromised.
So when you feed an aging system the exact same chemical compounds and macronutrient ratios as a younger system, you're basically ignoring the physiological reality of the aging process.
You are. It is a biological mismatch that leads directly to chronic, irreversible disease.
Which is why today we are conducting a critical, medically rigorous reevaluation of dietary protein protocols specifically tailored for adults over 60.
Right.
We're going to focus on hidden dietary toxins that have been, frankly, normalized in the modern diet, and conversely, we will examine the powerful regenerative alternatives that the aging body actually requires.
And our analysis here is firmly grounded in clinical data. We're looking at findings presented in a comprehensive health presentation titled Seniors, These 4 Common Meats Are Killing People Over 60.
Which aggregates multiple peer-reviewed studies to challenge these deeply ingrained dietary assumptions.
Yes. Our mission today is to impartially and thoroughly unpack this clinical data for you. We must strip away decades of marketing myths and outdated nutritional dogma.
To provide a medically sound, biologically accurate framework.
Exactly. The primary goal here is the protection of your cardiovascular system, the preservation of your cognitive function, and the absolute optimization of your longevity.
And to be clear, we are operating this deep dive as a serious medical panel. This is a strictly educational, authoritative analysis of your biological maintenance.
The data we are about to explore demands your utmost focus because the implications for your daily living and your long-term survival are profound.
So let's get right into the data. We need to begin by examining what the source identifies as the chemical burden of convenience.
Right, the processed meats.
Specifically, we're looking at the meats ranked as the 4th and 2nd most dangerous for this older demographic. That is deli ham, which encompasses most processed cold cuts, and conventional pork sausage.
These are products that have been completely normalized through everyday convenience.
Exactly. They are sitting in the refrigerators of millions of seniors right this minute. But, biologically speaking, they act as slow-acting poisons for an aging filtration system.
Let's look at the fundamental mechanism of harm here. The primary concern with ultra-processed meats, the ham, the turkey, the bologna, is what happens at the molecular level when they are manufactured and preserved.
Because to understand the danger, we really have to look at the industrial processing.
We do. The manufacturing of these meats relies heavily on specific chemical preservatives to extend their shelf life indefinitely and to maintain an artificial, appealing pink coloration.
And the most prominent of these chemicals is sodium nitrite.
Yes. Now, on its own, sitting in a vat in a factory, sodium nitrite is just a highly effective preservative. However, the acute danger arises the moment this chemical enters the human digestive tract.
Or when it's exposed to high heat during cooking.
Precisely. Within the biological environment of your body, sodium nitrite reacts with the naturally occurring amino acids present in the meat itself.
Creating entirely new compounds.
Right. It forms entirely new, highly volatile compounds known as nitrosamines.
And it is crucial to understand that nitrosamines are not just benign, everyday byproducts of digestion. They are recognized, documented carcinogens.
Yes, they are.
They have the specific biological ability to directly damage your DNA and fuel the mutation and growth of cancer cells.
We aren't talking about a theoretical risk here. We are talking about a daily low-dose exposure to a compound that actively degrades your genetic integrity every time you eat a sandwich.
Which brings us to why age 60 is the critical variable in this equation.
Right. If we look at a younger individual, say someone in their 20s, they possess a highly robust cellular repair mechanism. Their liver and kidneys operate at peak detoxification efficiency.
So they might process a moderate amount of these nitrosamines without experiencing an immediate systemic failure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because their body can clear the toxins rapidly. But at age 60 and beyond, the entire digestive architecture fundamentally slows down.
Gastrointestinal transit time increases significantly.
Yes, and this means that these carcinogenic compounds remain in direct physical contact with the delicate mucosal lining of your digestive tract for much longer periods.
So the exposure time to the toxin is essentially multiplied just by virtue of the digestive system slowing down.
Exactly. The prolonged exposure is devastating. Furthermore, the liver's enzymatic pathways, the specific biological channels responsible for neutralizing toxins, are inherently less efficient in an older adult.
The risk doesn't just add up, it multiplies with every single exposure.
Right. The body simply cannot clear the chemical burden fast enough, leading to an accumulation of cellular damage over time.
This brings us directly to the clinical data provided in the source, which is staggering. They highlight a massive 2020 study published in the International Journal of Epidemiology.
And it's important to note, this was not a small, localized sample size.
No, the researchers tracked 40,000 seniors over an extended period. The findings were definitive. Those individuals who consumed processed deli meats 4 or more times a week had a 24% higher risk of developing heart failure.
And a 19% increased risk of all-cause mortality compared to those who rarely ate them.
A 24% increase in heart failure is a massive clinical outcome for something as mundane as a daily lunch habit.
It is a profound statistical increase, and it requires us to look beyond just the carcinogenic nitrosamines to understand the full picture of cardiovascular collapse.
Because the cold cuts are also heavily laden with other additives.
Exactly. The scientists conducting this study pointed out that cold cuts are also heavily laden with hidden sugars, industrial phosphates, and extreme, unnatural concentrations of sodium.
Which places an immense stress on the kidneys.
Yes. When you introduce high levels of processed sodium and industrial phosphates into an older adult's bloodstream, you are placing an immediate and often overwhelming stress on the renal system.
Let's break down exactly why the kidneys take the brunt of this.
Well, the kidneys are the primary organs responsible for regulating fluid balance and filtering out metabolic waste from your blood. When you consume a massive dose of sodium from a few slices of deli ham, the concentration of sodium in your blood spikes.
And to survive this, your biology demands equilibrium.
Right. The high sodium forces your body to urgently retain water to dilute the blood back to a safe concentration. This forced water retention instantly drives up your total blood volume.
And when you have more fluid pumping through the exact same closed system of blood vessels, your blood pressure inevitably spikes.
Precisely.
If we picture the aging kidney, you can almost visualize it as a highly intricate mechanical filtration system in a municipal water plant.
This is a very accurate analogy.
If that filtration system has been running continuously every single minute of every day for 65 years, the microfilters, which in our biology are called nephrons, have undergone inevitable wear and tear. They are fragile.
Very fragile.
So, if you suddenly flush a highly concentrated, sludgy mixture of industrial chemicals, phosphates, and corrosive salts through that aged system, you aren't just making the filter work a little harder, you're actively causing structural microdamage to the filter itself.
Exactly. The system gets overwhelmed, the pressure builds up to a critical point, and the pipes, your blood vessels, begin to take the brunt of that concussive force.
And in a clinical setting, we see the physical results of this overwhelmed filtration system as edema.
Right. Severe fluid retention, primarily manifesting in the lower extremities, the ankles, the feet, and the calves.
Because the aging heart is struggling against the high pressure to pump this thicker blood volume.
Yes, and gravity causes the excess fluid to settle at the lowest points. This constant systemic stress is one of the fastest, most aggressive ways to accelerate internal inflammation.
And we must understand that in this context, inflammation is not just localized swelling from a rolled ankle. It is a systemic biological alarm state occurring within the inner lining of every blood vessel in your body.
And that systemic alarm state has catastrophic downstream effects, particularly neurologically.
The source notes that these processed meats have been directly linked to accelerated cognitive decline in seniors.
They point to this exact internal vascular inflammation and the occurrence of microvascular events, which are essentially tiny silent strokes, as the culprits.
So the elevated blood pressure and the chemical damage to the vascular walls degrade the delicate microscopic blood vessels in the brain.
It is a process of quietly suffocating your cognitive function over time, simply starving the brain tissue of optimal blood flow.
Which is exactly why we need to address a very common, deeply flawed piece of nutritional advice, the concept of everything in moderation.
It is a dangerous fallacy when applied to these specific ultra-processed foods in an aging demographic.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to challenge this idea of moderation directly. We hear it constantly from general practitioners. But if we are looking at compounds that directly damage DNA and an aging filtration system that physically lacks the capacity to clear them, does the highly concentrated nature of these industrial chemicals render the very idea of moderate consumption biologically dangerous for seniors?
Yes, absolutely. From a strictly biological and medical standpoint, applying the concept of moderation to known carcinogens and high-concentration industrial phosphates in a compromised 60-plus-year-old system is completely medically unsound.
We are not talking about moderating your intake of natural fruit sugars here.
No, where the body has natural metabolic pathways to handle them, we are talking about synthetic compounds that actively degrade cellular tissue.
Let's look at conventional pork sausage, which the source ranks as the #2 greatest danger.
In pork sausage, the concentration of these additives is exceptionally high. When you eat a standard link of commercial pork sausage, you are consuming multiple harmful compounds simultaneously in a single, highly processed package.
And the clinical data specifically focused on pork sausage is chilling. The source references a major 2022 study published in BMC Medicine. They followed 18,000 adults over the age of 60 for nearly a decade.
And the findings showed that consuming processed pork sausage just twice a week, which almost anyone would consider standard moderation, resulted in a 22% higher risk of colon cancer.
And a 16% greater risk of severe kidney dysfunction. Eating sausage twice a week is a standard Sunday breakfast habit for millions of people, yet the data shows it yields a massive, measurable increase in oncological and renal risk.
Furthermore, beyond the nitrites and the sodium, conventional pork sausage introduces very high levels of highly processed, degraded saturated fats into a system that is already burdened.
Which aggressively raises low-density lipoprotein, or LDL cholesterol.
Right, which directly accelerates the buildup of arterial plaque.
Yeah.
For an older patient who already has underlying high cholesterol, borderline diabetes, or mild hypertension, regularly consuming these concentrated chemical cocktails becomes a triple threat to their cardiovascular survival.
The biological imperative here is absolute elimination from the diet, not moderation.
Exactly. The aging body requires extreme nutrient density to maintain its structure, not a continuous chemical burden that it must expend energy to fight.
Now, moving from the chemically preserved meats of the deli counter, we need to turn our attention to foods that are fundamentally altered by extreme thermal processing.
This brings us to the psychological trap of comfort food.
Right, and the third most dangerous meat identified in the source, deep-fried chicken, particularly when sourced from fast food establishments or frozen grocery aisles.
This is an item that, statistically, is one of the most frequently ordered restaurant meals by Americans over the age of 60.
But beneath the sensory appeal and the nostalgia of a golden crust lies an absolute metabolic disaster.
It is vital to separate the protein from the preparation here. The danger is not inherent to the poultry itself. The profound danger lies entirely in the method of industrial preparation.
When you take a piece of chicken, batter it in refined, simple carbohydrates, specifically heavily processed white flour, and submerge it in cheap, industrially manufactured seed oils at extreme temperatures, you are initiating a catastrophic chemical reaction.
You are essentially creating a biological delivery vehicle for trans fats, acrylamides, and a highly destructive class of compounds known as advanced glycation end products, or AGEs.
We need to break down these cellular threats very precisely because the terminology can be dense, but the biological impact is severe.
The source emphasizes that these toxic compounds promote massive internal inflammation and damage multiple organ systems simultaneously.
Let's start with the advanced glycation end products. What exactly are AGEs at a molecular level, and how do they function destructively once they are inside the aging body?
Well, to understand advanced glycation end products, we have to look at a chemical process called glycation. Inside the body, glycation occurs when excess proteins or fats bind with sugar molecules in the bloodstream.
It's a natural but damaging process.
Right. However, this exact same damaging chemical process occurs rapidly and violently outside the body when foods are cooked at extremely high temperatures in the presence of sugars and fats, especially through deep frying.
So the boiling oil and the carbohydrate batter interact to form massive quantities of preformed AGGs.
Yes, so the food is essentially structurally damaged before you even take a bite.
When you consume deep-fried chicken, you are ingesting a concentrated dose of these preformed AGs.
And once they enter your digestive tract and are absorbed into the body, these compounds are highly reactive and deeply destructive. They bind to specific cellular receptors, cleverly named RAGEs, or receptors for advanced glycation end products.
And when an AG binds to a RAGE, it triggers an intense systemic inflammatory cascade.
Physically, what they do is cause living tissue to become stiff, cross-linked, and inflexible.
Let's visualize what that stiffness means for an older adult's internal organs. If our healthy blood vessels are supposed to operate like supple, flexible rubber hoses that expand and contract with every heartbeat, accumulating these advanced glycation end products is akin to leaving those rubber hoses out in the freezing winter.
Over time, they become brittle, stiff, and highly prone to cracking or rupturing under the pressure of the fluid pumping through them.
That is an exact representation of what is happening at the endothelial level, the crucial inner lining of your blood vessels.
Yes. When those vessels stiffen, they lose their elasticity, which drastically increases the risk of chronic hypertension and accelerates atherosclerosis, the hardening of the arteries.
But it doesn't stop at the vascular system.
No. AGEs also accumulate in the cartilage of the joints, accelerating degradation and amplifying arthritic pain. They accumulate in the brain, contributing to neurodegeneration.
And again, we must contextualize this heavily within the aging metabolism, because a 25-year-old can eat fried chicken and not immediately suffer a cardiac event. Why does an older adult struggle so profoundly with clearing these specific compounds compared to a younger metabolism?
Well, the human body does possess natural defense mechanisms to clear out AGs, but those mechanisms rely entirely on robust renal function and a deep reserve of cellular antioxidants.
And as we firmly established, kidney filtration efficiency naturally declines as we enter our 60s and 70s.
The kidneys simply cannot filter out the AGs as fast as they are coming in. Therefore, a 65-year-old eating a meal of fried chicken is retaining a significantly higher percentage of these toxic tissue-stiffening compounds than a younger person eating the exact same meal.
The toxic load accumulates much faster and the damage is sustained longer.
Right. And we cannot ignore the trans fats and the acrylamides involved in the frying process.
Acrylamides are volatile chemical compounds that form specifically in starchy foods, like the flour batter, during high-temperature cooking. They are well documented and strongly linked to carcinogenic activity.
And then you have the trans fats, which are created by the repeated heating and cooling of industrial frying oils. These trans fats actively lower your high-density lipoprotein, the HDL, which is the protective cholesterol.
While simultaneously driving up the dangerous LDL cholesterol.
It is a rapid metabolic cascade of disaster that begins the literal moment these specific thermally altered fats enter an older adult's bloodstream.
This metabolic cascade creates an environment of intense systemic oxidative stress. The aging body is forced to urgently expend its limited, age-depleted antioxidant reserves just to fight off the acute massive inflammation caused by the fried food.
Which leaves the body's other systems completely vulnerable to cellular damage because the defense system is overwhelmed dealing with the lunch you just ate.
It is a continuous, self-inflicted biochemical injury that is heavily disguised as comforting, harmless food.
This highlights a deeply ironic and critical observation. The severe threat in deep-fried chicken is entirely man-made.
It is the industrial preparation, the boiling seed oil, the refined flour batter. The underlying protein, the poultry itself, is merely the biological delivery mechanism for the toxins.
However, observing that irony sets up the transition to our next, and perhaps most shocking, clinical warning.
Because we are about to address a food where the poultry itself, in its most basic, stripped-down, supposedly unprocessed form, represents the greatest biological threat to an older adult.
We are transitioning away from obvious junk food, which most people intuitively know is unhealthy, to what the clinical data indicates is the ultimate nutritional betrayal for the aging demographic.
We must now expose the #1 threat on this clinical list: Factory-farmed, skinless chicken breast.
Yes.
For decades, this exact food item has been widely prescribed by doctors, heavily recommended by dietitians, and aggressively marketed as the absolute gold standard for a heart-healthy diet.
It is the staple protein of almost every weight loss and cardiovascular program in the country.
Yet the source data definitively ranks it as the single most dangerous meat for seniors to consume regularly.
And the reason this is the #1 threat is due to a profound, pervasive, false sense of security.
Millions of seniors are actively choosing this exact meat, eating it day after day, genuinely believing they are engaging in responsible biological self-care. But in reality, they are silently accelerating their own physical decline.
It is a terrifying medical trap because you cannot fix a health problem if you are utterly convinced that the cause of the problem is actually the cure.
So to understand why skinless chicken breast is so detrimental to an aging body, we have to divide the issue into two distinct clinical realities: the agricultural reality of how the product is created and the biological reality of how an aging digestive system metabolizes it.
Let's begin with the agricultural reality.
Yeah.
The vast majority of standard supermarket chicken breast is sourced from massive industrial factory farms. These birds are not eating anything resembling a natural diet.
They are fed highly processed, genetically modified corn and soy.
And because of the extreme confinement, they're routinely administered varying levels of antibiotics and historically even arsenic-based compounds, simply to rapidly accelerate their growth and manage the inevitable diseases inherent in confined feedlots.
And the biological reality is that the chemical residue of that agricultural process does not simply vanish when the bird is processed.
Not at all. Studies published in highly respected journals like Environmental Health Perspectives consistently confirm that residues of these chemicals, particularly antibiotics and hormone-like growth substances, remain embedded in the muscle tissue of the meat.
And seniors are significantly more sensitive to these trace additives than younger populations. When an older adult consumes trace antibiotics daily through their healthy chicken breast dinner, it actively and aggressively disrupts their gut microbiome.
And disrupting the microbiome in a senior is a critical medical event. As we age, our gut flora naturally loses diversity, which inherently weakens our immune response.
Introducing trace antibiotics daily acts like a slow-drip poison to the remaining beneficial bacteria.
Furthermore, the source cites a deeply concerning 2021 Consumer Reports test. They analyzed standard supermarket chicken breasts and found that over 60% of them tested positive for antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
Let's pause and emphasize the gravity of that statistic. Over 60% contained antibiotic-resistant pathogens. That represents a severe, immediate public health hazard for the senior demographic.
Yes, an older adult inherently possesses a naturally weaker, slower immune system. Exposing that compromised system to highly resistant pathogens through what is universally marketed as a safe protein source is incredibly dangerous.
But as alarming as the agricultural contamination is, it's only the first half of the problem. The second half is the severe, silent nutritional void created by consuming the meat completely skinless and hyper-lean.
This is where we need to deeply analyze this strict biological necessity of dietary fat for the aging body. Skinless chicken breast is aggressively stripped of all its natural fats during processing. It is almost entirely pure protein.
Now, while the bodybuilding and fitness industry of the 1990s praised this hyper-lean profile, it is metabolically devastating for someone over the age of 60.
It truly is.
I want to make sure this is crystal clear for the listener. Why is eating pure protein without fat so damaging as we get older?
It is devastating because the human body simply cannot utilize key life-sustaining micronutrients without the physical presence of dietary fat in the digestive tract.
Specifically, we're talking about the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K.
Exactly. These specific vitamins are absolutely crucial for maintaining bone density, preserving neurological function, and controlling systemic inflammation.
If you ingest these vitamins, perhaps through a morning supplement or a side of vegetables, but your digestive tract contains no dietary fat because your primary protein source is an ultra-lean dried chicken breast, your body cannot absorb them.
The gallbladder doesn't release the necessary bile salts if there's no fat to trigger it. Therefore, those crucial vitamins simply pass completely through the gastrointestinal tract unutilized.
To illustrate how critical this mechanism is, let's use a pharmacological analogy. In medicine, certain highly potent drugs require what we call a carrier molecule. If a doctor administers the drug without its specific carrier, the body cannot absorb it.
The drug is biologically useless.
And the patient receives absolutely zero therapeutic benefit, no matter how much of the drug is given. Eating an ultra-lean chicken breast to be healthy while deliberately stripping away the naturally occurring animal fat is exactly like administering a life-saving drug without its required carrier molecule.
It renders the nutritional value biologically inert. And the clinical signs of this severe fat deficiency in seniors are highly visible in a clinical setting. Chronic, unresolvable dry skin, thinning and brittle hair, and a dangerously slow rate of cellular repair and wound healing.
Beyond the severe malabsorption of vital vitamins, we must deeply examine the glycemic impact of this food.
Yes. When an older adult consumes ultra-lean meat, it is almost always eaten in conjunction with simple carbohydrates like white rice, mashed potatoes, or standard bread.
This combination causes an extreme, damaging physiological response.
Without the presence of dietary fat to slow down gastric emptying and physically blunt the absorption of glucose in the small intestine, those carbohydrates hit the bloodstream incredibly rapidly.
This causes a severe acute blood sugar spike.
Exactly. And that spike is followed inevitably by a massive, urgent release of insulin from the pancreas, which then leads to a subsequent exhausting energy crash.
This cycle leads to highly unstable appetite regulation, severe metabolic stress, and over time directly contributes to the development of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes.
And the typical preparation of this meat heavily compounds the danger. To keep it healthy, it is typically grilled or roasted with no oil until it is completely dry, and it is served repeatedly day after day.
This intense dietary monotony is a direct paved path to malnutrition in seniors. The source highlights a pivotal, deeply illuminating 2018 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition.
The researchers observed older adults who consume skinless chicken breast more than 5 times a week.
The clinical results were alarming and counterintuitive. These specific individuals faced a 16% higher rate of severe muscle loss, which is clinical sarcopenia, and they showed significantly increased physical frailty compared to seniors eating a varied diet with higher fat content.
It seems like a biological paradox that eating a high-protein food would actively lead to muscle loss, but the underlying biology explains it perfectly.
Muscle protein synthesis requires vastly more than just the basic amino acids found in lean white meat.
It requires a highly complex matrix of micronutrients, high levels of bioavailable zinc, vitamin B12, and naturally occurring collagen.
Nutrients that are distinctly, glaringly lacking in a skinless chicken breast.
But are deeply abundant in darker meats, connective tissues, and organ meats. Furthermore, the study noted a very troubling detail. While the participants' cholesterol did not improve on this ultra-lean, low-fat diet, their inflammatory markers actively and consistently rose.
This is almost certainly due to the severe, chronic lack of anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids and the slow accumulation of damage from missing micronutrient pathways.
The clinical takeaway here is profound and requires immediate action. A deeply entrenched false sense of security is actively preventing millions of seniors from seeking out the vital, life-sustaining micronutrients they are silently lacking.
The very food they rely on daily for strength and heart health is fundamentally contributing to their frailty and decline. The medical intervention requires moving completely away from the monotony of factory-farmed, hyper-lean white meat.
We must understand that for the aging body, healthy, naturally occurring animal fats are not the enemy. They are the absolute, non-negotiable, required transport mechanism for biological survival.
Having comprehensively dismantled the dietary habits and the false health foods that are currently causing biological decline, we must now pivot our clinical focus entirely.
We need to examine the precise, highly potent medical interventions required to actively rebuild degraded tissue, fiercely protect neurological function, and restore metabolic vitality in the over 60 population.
We are moving away from the toxins and we are stepping into the treatments. We begin this vital restorative phase by analyzing the meats ranked by the source as the fourth and third most beneficial: grass-fed lamb and pasture-raised duck.
Now, these are not typical everyday staples in the standard modern American diet, but biologically, they function as incredibly high-yield nutritional interventions.
Let's look closely at the clinical data surrounding lamb. A 2020 study published in the journal Nutrients focused specifically on grass-fed lamb.
The data indicates that seniors who consumed lamb just twice a week experienced a massive 23% improvement in overall muscle strength and a 15% drop in systemic inflammatory markers.
From a clinical perspective, what is the exact biochemical driver behind such a significant, measurable increase in physical strength in older adults?
The profound improvement in muscle retention and the reversal of sarcopenia observed in the lamb study is deeply multifaceted. Firstly, lamb specifically, when it is exclusively grass-fed, provides a complete, highly bioavailable amino acid profile that the aging body desperately requires to combat muscle wasting.
But more importantly, it delivers these essential amino acids alongside optimal, naturally concentrated levels of highly absorbable zinc and vitamin B12.
As we age, our stomach acid naturally decreases, which drastically diminishes our ability to absorb vitamin B12 from standard foods or synthetic supplements.
And B12 is non-negotiable for energy.
It is absolute. The B12 found naturally in the tissue of lamb is highly absorbable, bypassing much of the need for strong gastric acid. It is critical for proper red blood cell formation and the maintenance of the myelin sheath in neurological health.
Without adequate oxygen transport via healthy, numerous red blood cells, muscle tissue simply cannot sustain exertion, leading to profound chronic weakness.
By supplying bioavailable B12 and zinc, the lamb is effectively upgrading the blood's capacity to fuel the muscles.
The source also specifically highlights a highly unique compound found abundantly in grass-fed lamb called conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. How does CLA function therapeutically within the aging metabolism?
Conjugated linoleic acid is a naturally occurring trans fatty acid. Now, we must explicitly differentiate this from the highly toxic synthetic trans fats found in the deep-fried foods we discussed earlier.
Natural CLA has highly beneficial, well-documented metabolic effects.
Clinical studies strongly suggest that CLA supports healthy lipid metabolism and weight management by directly influencing how the aging body utilizes and stores fat at the cellular level.
But more crucially for the senior demographic, CLA has demonstrated significant, potent anti-inflammatory properties.
It actively helps downregulate the production of inflammatory cytokines in the bloodstream. This specific biochemical action perfectly explains the 15% drop in inflammatory markers noted in the clinical study. It essentially acts as a chemical signal to help quiet the systemic alarm state in the vascular system.
This brings us to a vital practical question regarding sourcing because the source makes a very specific distinction. I must ask for a precise scientific differentiation here. At the molecular level, what is the exact difference between conventional feedlot-raised meat and pasture-raised or grass-fed meat?
Well, it alters it fundamentally and highly measurably. Does the animal's diet actually alter the chemical composition of the tissue the human patient is ultimately consuming?
Yes. A cow or a sheep raised in a confined feedlot fed a highly unnatural diet of genetically modified corn and soy will produce meat that is heavily dangerously skewed toward omega-6 fatty acids.
In high unbalanced amounts, omega-6 fatty acids are highly pro-inflammatory in the human body. Conversely, an animal allowed to forage naturally on its biologically appropriate diet of diverse living pasture grasses will incorporate exceptionally high levels of omega-3 fatty acids into its muscle tissue.
And omega-3s are the goal.
Absolutely. Omega-3s are potently anti-inflammatory. Furthermore, grass-fed animals accumulate significantly higher levels of vital fat-soluble vitamins and powerful antioxidants, like vitamin E, directly from the living chlorophyll-rich plants they consume.
So when you choose pasture-raised or grass-fed, you're not simply avoiding the synthetic hormones and the antibiotic residues of the commercial feedlot.
You are actively, intentionally ingesting a vastly superior anti-inflammatory chemical matrix that your body desperately needs to repair itself.
That biological distinction transitions perfectly into our analysis of pasture-raised duck, which the source ranks as the #3 most beneficial meat. Duck is a highly unique clinical intervention because it directly addresses a silent, pervasive epidemic among the elderly population.
Chronic, debilitating fatigue and poor peripheral circulation.
The source cites a highly compelling 2019 study published in Frontiers in Nutrition. In this study, seniors consuming duck twice a week for 6 months showed a remarkable 19% improvement in cognitive function scores and a 21% decrease in overall inflammatory markers.
The primary mechanism credited here by the researchers is duck's dark, richly oxygenated meat, which delivers extremely high levels of highly absorbable heme iron.
The clinical distinction between heme iron and non-heme iron is absolutely critical in geriatric medicine, and it is rarely explained to patients.
Non-heme iron is the type found in plant sources, like spinach or lentils. It is notoriously difficult for the human body to absorb. It requires complex enzymatic conversion processes in the gut that are highly inefficient in an older, less acidic digestive tract.
Heme iron, on the other hand, is found exclusively in animal tissue, and duck is an exceptionally rich source.
Heme iron is preformed. It is biologically identical to the iron in our own blood, and it is absorbed directly across the intestinal wall with extreme, immediate efficiency.
This is a crucial point regarding fatigue. Many seniors suffering from what they mistakenly believe is just irreversible age-related cognitive decline or unavoidable chronic lethargy are, in clinical reality, suffering from silent subclinical anemia.
Their brains and their muscles are simply not receiving adequate oxygen because they literally lack the raw, bioavailable materials needed to build healthy hemoglobin.
Precisely. So by introducing high-yield heme iron through a concentrated source like pasture-raised duck, we are actively and rapidly improving red blood cell formation.
Which in turn completely restores optimal oxygen transport to the starving brain tissue and the fatigued muscles. It is a direct medical intervention treating the root cause of the fatigue, not merely masking a symptom.
And we must also deeply address the biology of duck fat. Unlike the highly processed saturated fats or synthetic oils that cause cardiovascular concern, naturally occurring duck fat operates biologically very similarly to high-quality olive oil.
Correct. The chemical profile of duck fat is predominantly composed of highly stable monounsaturated fatty acids. Specifically, it is incredibly rich in oleic acid, which is the exact same primary heart-healthy fatty acid found in extra virgin olive oil.
These monounsaturated fats are highly structurally stable during cooking. This means they do not readily oxidize, break down, and form dangerous cancer-causing free radicals when exposed to heat.
Within the aging body, these specific fats actively support healthy cholesterol ratios. They physically help clear dangerous LDL from the bloodstream while meticulously maintaining the protective HDL levels.
It is a profound, powerful nutritional asset for long-term cardiovascular maintenance.
We have clearly established the restorative power of pasture-raised lamb and duck, but we must now advance to the absolute ultimate longevity protocols.
We are moving from excellent restorative meats to the absolute pinnacle of biological nutrient density. These are the clinical heavy hitters.
For an aging, deteriorating body, these specific foods do not function merely as sustenance. They function almost identically to highly targeted modern medicine.
We are now analyzing the number 2 and number 1 most clinically beneficial proteins: whole sardines consumed with their bones and skin, and grass-fed beef liver.
These two sources represent the most intensely concentrated, biologically appropriate delivery systems for the precise chemical compounds required to rapidly halt physical decline.
Let us begin with sardines, which the source ranks as the number 2 most beneficial meat. The clinical data supporting this small fish is truly remarkable. A rigorous 2022 study published in the Journal of Nutrition, Health, and Aging tracked older adults who consumed whole sardines at least twice a week for a period of 12 weeks.
In just 3 months, the participating seniors demonstrated an astonishing 29% improvement in measured bone density and a massive 32% reduction in dangerous triglyceride levels.
These are absolute vital markers for preventing crippling osteoporosis and severe heart disease. From a biochemical perspective, what makes this specific small fish such an aggressive, effective biological intervention?
The profound efficacy of sardines lies entirely in their complete, deeply synergistic nutritional matrix. And this is specifically true when they are consumed whole, meaning the patient is eating the flesh, the skin, and the soft, highly edible bones.
In modern medicine, when an older adult is diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, they are frequently told to take an isolated synthetic calcium supplement.
However, the aging body deeply struggles to utilize isolated calcium properly. Without the necessary biological cofactors to guide it, that supplemental calcium often inappropriately deposits in the soft tissues and the arteries, actively contributing to cardiovascular plaque and arterial stiffening rather than entering the bone tissue where it belongs.
Sardines circumvent this dangerous issue entirely.
Because they provide the calcium in its natural, intended biological housing, complete with all the necessary instructions.
Exactly. The soft, digestible bones of the sardine provide a massive, highly bioavailable dose of calcium. But critically, the dark flesh and the skin of the sardine simultaneously deliver extremely high levels of natural vitamin D and potent anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids.
Vitamin D is not just a vitamin. It is a required steroid hormone that signals the intestines to actually open up and absorb the calcium into the bloodstream.
So the bones provide the raw material, and the flesh provides the key to unlock the absorption.
And it goes further. The omega-3 fatty acids aggressively reduce systemic inflammation in the body. This is crucial for bone health because high inflammation directly increases the activity of osteoclasts, the specific cells responsible for breaking down and destroying bone tissue.
By lowering inflammation, you halt the destruction of the bone.
You are providing the exact, perfect building blocks for the skeletal matrix, while simultaneously delivering the complex biological instructions on exactly how to use them.
And crucially for seniors, sardines provide all of this without the high, dangerous mercury risk associated with consuming larger, predatory fish like tuna or swordfish.
As for the cardiovascular benefits, that massive 32% reduction in triglycerides is a direct, measurable result of those high-dose omega-3 fatty acids aggressively clearing out lipid buildup from the hepatic and cardiovascular systems.
This brings us to the absolute apex of the nutritional hierarchy. We must now discuss grass-fed beef liver. This is definitively ranked as the #1 most beneficial meat for seniors.
I want to frame beef liver carefully for the listener. You should not view this simply as a food item or a culinary choice.
Yep.
You must view it as a direct, powerful cellular upgrade.
Functionally, consuming high-quality grass-fed liver is clinically comparable to receiving an intravenous micronutrient infusion in a hospital setting.
The source details a fascinating 2023 clinical trial published in the highly respected journal Nutrients. In this trial, older adults were prescribed a very small dose, just 100 grams of beef liver, twice a week for 10 weeks.
The clinical outcomes were staggering. Researchers recorded a 44% increase in overall physical energy scores and a 37% measurable improvement in cognitive memory tests, alongside massive gains in healthy hemoglobin levels.
To truly understand how such small doses create such massive physiological shifts, we must meticulously break down the unique biochemistry of hepatic tissue. The liver, in all mammals, is the primary storage organ for the most critical, life-sustaining nutrients.
When an older adult consumes grass-fed beef liver, they are ingesting a hyperconcentrated, perfectly balanced dose of preformed, highly bioavailable vitamin A, known clinically as retinol.
Retinol is absolutely essential for robust immune function, vision maintenance, and proper cellular differentiation. Furthermore, you are receiving astronomical, highly absorbable levels of vitamin B12, essential copper, and bioavailable zinc.
The copper aspect is particularly fascinating because it ties directly back to the anemia issue we discussed with the duck.
It does. Copper is the required biological catalyst to load iron into the hemoglobin molecule. You can consume all the iron in the world, but without adequate copper, your body cannot actually utilize the iron to build red blood cells.
Liver provides both the iron and the precise amount of copper needed to utilize it perfectly.
But the true, undeniable metabolic powerhouse mentioned in the source, the compound that drives these massive clinical results, is a molecule called coenzyme Q10, or CoQ10.
How does this specific enzyme trigger a massive 44% increase in physical energy in an older, fatigued adult?
Coenzyme Q10 is a vital, non-negotiable molecule utilized heavily by the mitochondria. The mitochondria are the microscopic energy-producing factories located within almost every single cell in your body.
CoQ10 is an essential, required component of the electron transport chain.
This is the highly complex biological process that ultimately generates adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. ATP is the literal, fundamental chemical energy currency of the human body. Every heartbeat, every muscle contraction, every conscious thought requires ATP.
And what happens to our natural CoQ10 levels as we cross into our 60s?
As we age, our endogenous internal production of CoQ10 plummets drastically. The mitochondria literally become starved of this crucial biochemical spark plug. This mitochondrial starvation leads directly to the profound, heavy cellular fatigue experienced by so many seniors.
Consuming grass-fed beef liver provides an immediate, highly absorbable dietary infusion of CoQ10 directly to those starving cells.
It rapidly and aggressively restores mitochondrial function. The cells can literally begin producing ATP energy at a younger, much more efficient rate.
Furthermore, the brain is the most energy-hungry organ in the body. That remarkable 37% improvement in memory scores is a direct, measurable result of this enhanced mitochondrial energy production occurring rapidly within the neurons of the brain.
This is a profound, undeniable medical reality. However, we must address the vital practical application specifically highlighted in the clinical source. To safely and effectively utilize beef liver as a medical intervention, proper preparation is critical.
The source highly emphasizes the biological necessity of soaking the liver in whole milk or heavily lemon-infused water for several hours prior to cooking.
This is not just an old culinary preference to improve the taste, it serves a highly specific functional purpose. The acidity and the enzymes work to tenderize the dense tissue and meticulously draw out residual blood and bitter impurities, making the intense nutrient profile much easier for an older digestive tract to assimilate.
Furthermore, the clinical source dictates specifically pairing the liver meal with fresh citrus or dark leafy greens. This is a highly calculated biochemical strategy.
Liver is incredibly rich in iron, and introducing ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C, from the citrus at the exact same time significantly enhances the intestinal absorption of that iron.
It is a precise, highly effective nutritional protocol. You apply heat quickly to lock in the volatile, heat-sensitive B vitamins. You strictly avoid overcooking, which destroys the delicate enzymatic value of the tissue. And you pair it with the exact correct chemical cofactors to maximize biological absorption.
It is, as the source unequivocally states, modern targeted medicine for the aging body.
We have covered a tremendous expanse of dense, highly critical clinical data today. To thoroughly summarize this deep dive, we must acknowledge a solemn, undeniable clinical reality.
The heavily processed, aggressively marketed foods that millions of older adults inherently assume are entirely safe. The convenient, chemical-laden daily cold cuts, the aggressively lean, factory-farmed, skinless chicken breasts are quietly, fundamentally, and continuously accelerating the aging process.
They are aggressively driving systemic inflammation, they are starving the aging body of absolutely essential fat-soluble micronutrients, and they are continuously exposing age-compromised immune systems to severe, dangerous agricultural toxins.
Conversely, we have clearly identified through rigorous data that the most historically overlooked, often maligned, fiercely nutrient-dense foods, the whole sardines, the grass-fed beef liver, the pasture-raised duck and lamb, contain the precise, highly bioavailable chemical compounds required to actively halt cognitive decline, aggressively rebuild degraded muscle architecture, and rapidly fortify failing skeletal density.
The fundamental medical takeaway is this. The aging body does not require fewer nutrients. It requires vastly more efficient, highly concentrated, and strictly biologically appropriate nutrients to survive and thrive.
This severe recalibration of our understanding of protein, fat metabolism, and cellular repair in our sixth decade and beyond leaves us with a deeply serious, lingering question.
If the fundamental underlying biological rules of human digestion, vitamin absorption, and cellular repair change so drastically and permanently after age 60, rendering our previous healthy dietary habits not just ineffective, but actively biologically dangerous, what other deeply ingrained daily routines from our 30s are currently failing us?
If our internal nutritional requirements have secretly shifted this dramatically without us realizing it, we must urgently, critically ask that question.
How are our decades-old unquestioned habits regarding our sleep architecture, our daily hydration protocols, or our repetitive high-impact exercise routines currently and silently working against our body's survival today?